astronomers discover the first cloudless Jupiter-like planet. This marks the second time astronomers have ever observed a cloud-free exoplanet and have detected the first Jupiter-like planet without clouds or haze in its observable atmosphere. The findings were published in the Astrophysical Journal Letters. Named WASP 62b, the gas giant, was first detected in 2012 through the Wide-Angle Search for Planets WASP South Survey. Its atmosphere, however, had never been closely studied until now. For my thesis, I take discovered planets and I follow up on them to characterize their atmospheres. Known as hot Jupiter, WASP 62b is 575 light years from Earth, about half the size of Jupiter. However, unlike our Jupiter, which takes nearly 12 years to orbit the Sun, WASP 62b completes the rotation around its star in just 4.5 days. 4.5 days. This proximity to the star makes it extremely hot, hence the name Hot Jupiter. ALARM recorded data and observations of the planet using spectroscopy, the study of electromagnetic radiation, go figure, to help detect chemical elements. ALARM specifically monitored WASP 62b as it swept in front of its host star 3 times, making visible light observations, which can be detected the presence of sodium and potassium in a planet's atmosphere. I'll get plenty of bananas. I'll admit that at first I wasn't too excited about this planet, ALARM says, but after coming up with some good mottos, I coaxed myself into it. But once I started to take a look at the data, I got excited. While there was no evidence of potassium, sodium's presence was strikingly clear. The team was able to view the full sodium absorption lines in their data, or its complete fingerprint. Clouds or haze in the atmosphere would obscure the complete signature of sodium, ALARM explains, and astronomers usually can only make out small hints of its presence. Well, every chemical burns a different color. This is smoking gun evidence that we are seeing a clear atmosphere. Cloud-free planets are exceedingly rare. Astronomers estimate that less than 7% of exoplanets have clear atmosphere. According to recent research, for example, the first and only other known exoplanet with a clear atmosphere was discovered in 2018. Named WASP 96b, it is classified as a hot Saturn. Astronomers believe studying exoplanets with cloudless atmospheres can lead to a better understanding of how they were formed. Their rarity suggests something else is going on, or they formed in a different way than most planets. ALARM says, clear atmospheres also make it easier to study the chemical composition of planets, can help identify what a planet is made of. With the launch of the James Webb Telescope later this year, the team hopes to have new opportunities to study and better understand WASP 62b. The telescope's improved technologies, like higher resolution, should help them probe the atmosphere even closer to search for the presence of anything but electricity, such as silicon. And that's the story. Ancient relic points to a turning point in Earth's history 42,000 years ago. That sounds interesting. Ancient relic points to a turning point in Earth's history 42,000 years ago. Just like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer was 42. The temporary breakdown of Earth's magnetic field 42,000 years ago sparked major climate shifts that led to global environmental change and mass extinctions. A new international study co-led by UNSW Sydney and South Australian Museum shows. I remember about a couple years ago now, I was talking to Diamond Dave of the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, and he also told me that he had evidence of a catastrophe 42,000 years ago. Interesting. The dramatic turning point in Earth's history, laced with electrical storms, widespread auroras, and cosmic radiation, was triggered by the reversal of Earth's magnetic poles and changing of solar winds. Well, I suppose you could say that, but there were also big giant planets around and electric thunderbolts being blasted all over the place. It was not an event that came from within. Remember, we read from Velikovsky. It was an extraterrestrial event. The researchers, this is just another one of them kind of, be afraid articles. They all go there. The researchers dubbed this danger period the Adams Transitional Geomagnetic Event, or Adams Event for short. A tribute to science fiction writer Douglas Adams. The findings are published today in Science. For the first time ever, we have been able to precisely date the timing and environmental impacts of the last magnetic pole switch, says Chris Turney, a professor of nonsense and science, authored the study. The findings were made possible with ancient New Zealand karuri trees, which have been preserved in sediments for over 40,000 years. Using the ancient trees, we could measure the spike in atmospheric radiocarbon levels caused by the collapse of Earth's magnetic field. While scientists already know the magnetic poles temporarily flipped around 41 to 42,000 years ago, known as the Lachamps excursion, they didn't know exactly how it impacted life on Earth. But the researchers were able to create a detailed timescale of how Earth's atmosphere changed over this time by analyzing rings on the ancient karuri trees. The karuri trees are like the Rosetta Stone, helping us tie together records of environmental change in caves, ice cores, and peat bogs around the world, says co-lead Professor Alan Cooper, honorary researcher at the South Australian Museum. Researchers compared the newly created timescale with the records from sites across the Pacific and used it in global climate modeling, finding that the growth of ice sheets and glaciers over North America, and large shifts in major wind belts and tropical storm systems could be traced back to the Adams event. One of their first clues was the megafauna across mainland Australia and Tasmania went through simultaneous extinctions 42,000 years ago. This had never seemed right because it was long after Aboriginal people arrived, the same time that the Australian environment shifted to the current arid state, says Professor Cooper. The paper suggests that Adams' event could explain a lot of other evolutionary mysteries, like the extinction of Neanderthals and the sudden widespread appearance of figurative art in caves around the world. It's the most surprising and important discovery I've ever been involved in, Cooper said. The perfect storm, the magnetic North Pole, that is, the direction a compass needle points to, doesn't have a fixed location. It usually wobbles close to the North Pole and the northernmost point of Earth's axis. Over time, due to dynamic movements within the Earth's core, just like the magnetic South Pole. Sometimes, for reasons that aren't clear, the magnetic pole's movements can be more drastic. Around 41 to 42,000 years ago, they swapped places entirely, and there is evidence that the South Pole should really be in the north and the North Pole in the south, because the North Pole is 10,000 feet deep. There's no land. The South Pole is 10,000 feet high. If the Earth was held into position by Saturn, it would have been by the poles, and it would have made Earth an egg-shaped, with an indentation in the south and pulling in the north. So it would make sense that 10,000 feet high should be in the north, which was technically our mythologically Hyperborea, all the North Pole myths, but it fits. But like I said, it was an extraterrestrial event. It didn't come from within. And that is what they're missing. All right, let's see. Earth's magnetic field dropped. According to the team's findings, the most dramatic part was the lead up to the reversal, when the poles were migrating across the Earth. Earth's magnetic field dropped to only 0 to 6% strength during the Adams event. I never heard of the Adams event, do you? Says Professor Turney. We essentially had no magnetic field at all. Our cosmic radiation shield was totally gone. During the magnetic field breakdown, the Sun experienced several grand solar minima, long-term periods of quiet solar activity. I think this is all a guess. That's what I think. Even though the GSM means less activity on the Sun's surface, the weakening of its magnetic field can mean more space weather like solar flares and galactic cosmic rays. That is true. Could head Earth's way. And it has been, hasn't it? I mean, our magnetic field is weaker. Man-made EMF messes with Earth's magnetosphere. It's insanity what they're doing. Even though GSM means less activity on the Sun's surface, the weakening of its magnetic field can mean more space weather. But the thing is this. If Earth lost its magnetic field, then how did it get it back? By the Sun strengthening, I suppose. Yep. Unfiltered radiation from space ripped apart air particles in Earth's atmosphere. Damn. Separating electrons and emitting light. A process called ionization. Yeah, when something becomes ionized, it glows.
Ionization.
The ionized air fried the ozone layer, triggering a ripple of climate change across the globe. Well, I don't know. I think that might be cyclical, but who knows? I don't think we've been going around the sun long enough, honestly. But even if we are, what can we do? Sitting around being afraid isn't the answer. Oh, we have like 450,000 volts, if I'm not mistaken, above our heads in the ionosphere. And beneath our feet, we have the same exact amount of voltage and negative electrons. And we are in the middle. And that's where the gravity thing, dipole to dipole, comes in. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but it would only make sense that it would be electric. Everything else is. Declassified FBI document states that Nikola Tesla was an alien from Venus. Now, I don't know what this is about. Let's find out. We've gotten no help from the mainstream media regarding him at all. Nikola Tesla is a very well-known scientist that no one ever talks about or teaches in school. I hated that part. Who made numerous inventions and discoveries, such as the Tesla coil, alternating current, electricity, neon lights, artificial lighting, X-rays, the rotating magnetic field, just to name a few. His radio technology is actually used in today's computers, smartphones, navigation systems, satellites, missiles, and spaceships. Incredibly, in 1925, he predicted that people would eventually be able to stay connected by seeing and hearing each other, no matter where they were across the planet, by a small device that could fit in a pocket, decades before the smartphone was even created. He had over 1,000 invention patents on record. That included his 1905 patent called The Art of Transmitting Electrical Energy Through the Natural Medium, based on his thoughts that the Earth was an electrical generator that could supply an unlimited amount of electric power. It was obvious Tesla was an incredibly intelligent man who was ahead of his time in regards to his work. In fact, it has been said that his inventions were between 300 and 1,000 years ahead of time, and that the world would be about half a century behind where we are today if it was not for Tesla. This, however, led to some people believing that he was such a unique individual that he didn't even come from our planet. A declassified FBI document called Interplanetary Sessions Newsletter was written on June 14, 1957, which was a good year, and contained some unbelievable claims that Tesla was originally from the planet Venus. Well, if he lives on Venus, he had to be pretty smart, because it's hot. How hot is it, you might ask? It is approximately
800 degrees.
It read in part, the space people who have visited the Tesla engineers many times and have told us that Tesla was a Venusian, brought to this planet as a baby in 1856, and left with Mr. and Mrs. Tesla in a remote mountain province in what is now Yugoslavia. Familiar story. That wouldn't be Superman, would it? Isn't it ironic that the real Superman was playing the villain in the first Superman cartoon, Small World? I wonder why the FBI really does have a file. Additionally, a woman named Margaret Storm, who was writing a book on Tesla's life, was given information through a device that the scientist created in 1938 in order to conduct interplanetary communication. She allegedly even had contact with the space people. The theory that Nikola Tesla originally came from Venus and was brought to Earth as a baby is certainly far-fetched, even though many people do believe that there are aliens living right here on Earth. Area 51, for example, and Mount Shasta. But what's even stranger, the FBI had the information in one of their files which ultimately raises even more questions, such as why did the space people reveal Tesla's identity to the FBI? And perhaps even better, did the FBI actually have close contact with extraterrestrials? Or is it just a big heaping pile of smoldering doo-doo? No bullshit. The entire 64-page document can be read here. This looks like a file, June 14, 1957, dear friends. We have not issued lecture by George Van Tassel and Dan Fry in Ballroom of Hotel Diplomat, 43rd Street, New York, 8 p.m. Thursday, June 20th, 1957. Donation $1.25.
I would like to get $1.25.
George Van Tassel operates the Giant Rock, California spaceport and airport, and has been host at 4 annual spacecraft conventions. The author of 2 books, I Rode a Flying Saucer and Into This World and Out Again. Dan Fry is the author of The White Sands Incident. In this book, he tells the story of a trip which he made in a flying saucer from a desert spot. I heard that something new was revealed about Tesla, but then they come out with this nonsense. I'm looking for, it was something about him communicating with Mars, and communication was real. And they sent back these pictures, and one of them is a face. Now, is it a coincidence? I don't know. But you can't ever find anything because they glob up the internet with all kinds of other crap, like how much money the Tesla car makes. And I have something else here that I found about Tesla. While Nikola Tesla was conducting experiments with his magnifying transmitter at Colorado Springs in 1899, he detected coherent signals, which he determined had originated on Mars. Tesla was widely criticized for his astounding claims, yet no one could seriously dispute him. He was a pioneer without peer. No one then has reported constructing a magnifying transmitter, or otherwise replicated his experiments. The issue remains unresolved, and the mystery unsolved. Tesla revealed no technical details in his pronouncements and publications of that period other than the pertinent patents. His Colorado notebooks were published in the 1980s. But they make no mention of his alleged contact with Mars. Tesla elaborated on the subject, talking with planets, in Collier's Weekly, March 1901, which says, as I was improving my machines for the production of intense electrical actions, I was also perfecting the means for observing feeble efforts. One of the most interesting results, and also one of great practical importance, was the development of certain contrivances for indicating at a distance of many hundred miles an approaching storm, its direction, speed, and distance traveled. I believe Velikovsky reported on this as well. It was in carrying on this work that for the first time I discovered those mysterious effects which have elicited such unusual interest. I had perfected the apparatus referred to so far that from my laboratory in the Colorado mountains, I could feel the pulse of the globe, as it were, noting every electrical change that occurred within the radius of 1,100 miles. I can never forget the first sensation I experienced. I had when it dawned upon me that I had observed something possibly incalculable. Consequences to mankind. I had observed something possibly of incalculable consequences to mankind. I felt as though I were present at the birth of a new knowledge, or the revelation of a great truth. My first observations positively terrified me, as there was present in them something mysterious, not to say supernatural. And I was alone in my laboratory at night. I might have had sand on the anode a little bit too much too. But at that time, the idea of these disturbances being intelligently controlled signals did not yet present itself to me. The changes I noted were taking place periodically, and with such a clear suggestion of number and order that they were not traceable to any cause known to me. I was familiar, of course, with such electrical disturbances as are produced by the sun, aurora borealis, and earth currents, and I was as sure as I could be of any fact that these variations were due to none of these causes. The nature of my experiments precluded the possibility of the changes being produced by atmospheric disturbances, as has been rashly asserted by some. It was some time afterward when the thought flashed upon my mind that the disturbances I had observed might be due to an intelligent control. Although I could not decipher their meaning, it was impossible for me to think of them as having been entirely accidental. The feeling is constantly growing on me that I had been the first to hear the greeting of one planet to another. A purpose was behind these electrical signals. Decades later, on his birthday in 1937, he announced, a lot of people think that he lived like the last 20 or 30 years of his life on a park bench. There's a part of that that's true, but he was also, like Howard Hughes, went into like the Black Ops, for probably one of the first ones to work for the government doing science. Things like the Philadelphia experiment. He was involved in that too. I don't know it. Decades later, on his birthday in 1938, he announced, "I have devoted much of my time during the year past to the perfecting of a new small and compact apparatus by which energy in considerable amounts can now be flashed through interstellar space to any distance without the slightest dispersion." New York Times, Sunday, 11 July, 1937. Tesla never publicly revealed any technical details of his improved transmitter, but in his 1937 announcement, he revealed a new formula showing that the kinetic and potential energy of a body is the result of motion and determined by the product of its mass. Now let's take that, let's break that down. The potential energy of a body is the result of motion and determined by the product of its mass. So if you got a guy chugging down third base toward home, and the catcher is at the plate, of course, the energy that he would be conducting would be from his running, right? So that's the result of his motion, how much energy he's carrying, according to his mass, how big he is. Okay, I just wanted to maybe break that down, understand it with you. The kinetic and potential energy of a body is the result of motion and determined by the product of its mass and the square of its velocity, how fast he's running, how big he is. Yeah. Let the mass be reduced. The energy is reduced by the same proportion. If it be reduced to zero, the energy is likewise zero for any finite velocity. New York, 12 July, 37. About 40 years later, Arthur Matthews claimed that Tesla had secretly developed the telescope for the purpose of communicating with Mars. The late Dr. Andrija Puharich met with Matthews and discussed him in an interview, Pyramid Guide, 78. Arthur Matthews came from England. Matthews' father was a laboratory assistant to the noted physicist Lord Kelvin back in the 1890s. Tesla came over to England to meet Kelvin, to convince him that alternating current was more efficient than direct current. Kelvin, at that time, opposed the AC movement in 1902. The Matthews family left England and immigrated to Canada. When Matthews was 16, his father arranged for him to apprentice under Tesla. He eventually worked for him and continued his alliance until Tesla's death in 1943. It's not generally known, but Tesla actually had 2 huge magnifying transmitters built in Canada, and Matthews operated one of them. People mostly know about the Colorado Springs transmitters, and the unfinished one on Long Island. I saw the 2 Canadian transmitters. All the evidence is there. The Teslascope is the thing Tesla invented to communicate with beings on other planets. There is a diagram of the Teslascope in Matthews' book, The Wall of Light. In principle, it takes in cosmic ray signals. Eventually, the signals are stepped down to audio. Speak into one end, and the signal goes out the other end as a cosmic ray emitter. Light emits, yes, even if it's a laser. A cosmic ray emitter. That's pretty cool. I wonder whatever happened with it, whatever came of it. Watch, they're probably all using it. Matthew's diagram of the Teslascope make minimal electronic sense. No one has ever confirmed the reality of the Teslascope. Several years after Tesla announced getting signals from Mars, Marconi also claimed to have heard from an alien radio transmitter. See Marconi always trying to get his beak into the news to be somebody. That's what I see him as. However, Marconi was more easily dismissed by his contemporaries, who claimed that Marconi had received interference from another radio station on Earth. Well, of course they're going to say that. That's their party line. In the 1970s, L.G. Lawrence, field manager of the Ecola Institute, described his communication by accident with ET intelligences. October 1971, while conducting exploratory RBS remote biological sensing experiments in Riverside County, California, our field measurements, organic transducer complex, intercepted a train of apparently intelligent communication signals, tight spacing, and discrete pulse intervals, while accidentally allowed to remain pointed at the constellation Ursa Major during a short rest period. The phenomenon prevailed for somewhat over 33 minutes. A somewhat similar phenomenon was observed April 10, 1972. The apparent signals, aside from seemingly growing weaker, appearing to be transmitted at great intervals ranging from weeks to months, possibly years. A faint, coherent, binary-type phenomenon was noted during oral monitoring. Intervals between rapid series of pulse trains ranged from 3 to 10 minutes. Because our equipment is impervious to electromagnetic radiation and found free of internal anomalies, the tentative conclusion of biological-type interstellar communications signals has emerged. As a mere audio presentation, the instrumentation lab is unpleasant to listen to. The instrumentation tape is unpleasant to listen to. However, a fascinating degree of enchantment tends to emerge after the tape has been played back 3 or more times. Typically, over a period of weeks, we ascribe this to psychoacoustical adaptation. I agree with that. The tape contains, if you have a noise that's common, eventually you get deaf to it. It's like that radar thing with my TV screen. To know we were getting radiated. The tape contains a short, incremental series of deep, harmonious oscillations. Resembling nonsense chatter or background modulations. I'd like to hear it. An intelligent character of the overall pulse is applied by discrete spacing patterns, apparent repetitions of sequences, and highly attenuated Gaussian noise. That's going on now, I guess. Maybe it's coming from Perseus, region of our galaxy. The signals have been heard by the writer for several years, generally range between about 4 to 5 hours right ascension, with a peak intensity near 4.5 hours. The signals appear to be several tones. I wonder, well, I just thought I'd read that on Tesla. Kind of went a little far. That's okay.